This is the start of this project. We're taking this 82 Oldsmobile Cutlass. We're going to ditch that crappy little 3.8 Buick in there, and we're going to put a 2JZ Toyota in. As you can see, we have more than an adequate amount of space to accommodate the much longer 2JZ engine. It'll actually come up to right about here, so we still should have several inches up to the radiator for running a larger radiator and fan setup. The way it's looking like it's going to come out, utilizing the stock GM transmission in the car, is the motor mounts are going to come out real close. 2JZ mounts will come out right at the front of the Crossmember, so they'll be real close. What issue we're going to run into is the front sump interfering with the steering linkage down there, and we'll see how that comes out when we get to it. Well, I got the old Buick 3.8 out along with the turbo 350 transmission that was behind it, drive shafts out, exhaust off, crossmembers out, radiator and everything else. All the other accessories that I needed to pull are up here. I saved the power steering lines because I'm hoping to just have hoses made that I can just tap that right to the 2JZ power steering pump. Same thing with the AC compressor. With measuring stuff out as far as where the oil pan sump was going to be, this is a front sump 2JZ that I have. It's not going to work with the Crossmember in the car. However, looking online at some pictures and spacing there, should be able to make a rear sump 2JZ oil pan fit in with minor modifications to the Crossmember, if any are needed. Now I'm starting with the transmission Crossmember. As you can see here, the Toyota mount is centered to the center line of the transmission and engine. Problem I'm running into is you can clearly see that the stock turbo 350 Crossmember is not centered in the well, and it also needs to go back a little bit so that I can clear the Crossmember up in the front with the sump on the oil pan. It doesn't have to go back very much. The rearmost bolt just has to go up to just touch the main body of that Crossmember going across. So a little bit of cutting and welding and moving that flange and should be in business. Now I'm in the middle of building the Crossmember for the transmission. To make sure that the spacing is going to work out with the engine Crossmember in the front and the firewall, we got to mind the back of the engine up here. I know I need to go to a rear sump oil pan, which is going to be roughly from about right here back to here. So what we're worried about is off the front area of that pan. The rear sump pan actually has the pickup tube and then a smaller recess for roughly this distance, and then it drops down for the sump of the pan here. So I'm going to try to get where this brace right here to my trans mount is going to be able to fit and clear the Crossmember, as long as we also clear the firewall. I'm not too worried about if I have to cut some off, because I do have quite a bit of room back here, a few inches anyway, that could be cut and modified, and I can reroute the brake and fuel lines if needed. Otherwise, pretty much the firewall is our hard point as far as going to the back and trying to get that sump to clear. You see, I've got the cutout Crossmember mounted up in there, and then right now I'm just going to go through the measurements to make sure it's going to work. Alright, so we're nearly getting it down in place here. The transmission's getting fairly close to where it needs to be at the back. I still got a couple inches to go back to the firewall yet. But what I'm running into is I got a turbo up against the heater AC box, and we got the AC pump down here interfering with the steering box very closely. So I need to start making some decisions or see what I can do about getting the box clearanced out on the heater core area with the turbos, which could be taken care of with a single, which I'm planning on doing anyway, but I was hoping to get it in complete
just the way it is and get it fired up on the stock ECU just to make sure the engine's good. As far as the steering box here, that's gonna be a big question mark. I'll have to see what I can come up with. Alright, now we've had to notch the heater core box that much just to get the turbos to really push it back a little bit. It should be able to get it to fit much better if we're able to get the engine down. We got the boost pipes like right up tight against here. I'm hoping we can drop the engine an inch and get it up underneath here, and that'll get us allowance room to move back a little bit further in the chassis, which will also help with the clearance problems. You can see where we kept rubbing right there on the steering box. And the motor mounts are quite a bit different, so we're going to be notching from about here down to here out for a little more clearance. Same thing on the other side. The engine will probably end up being roughly an inch offset to the passenger side of the car, and should be able to come out with a lot better fit than what I'm fighting with now. Alright, I've got the rear sump oil pan swapped on now. We got a lot more clearance to the front. Hopefully we won't be having any problems with the Crossmember now. But if we gotta modify it, we gotta modify it. Had to change the oil drain backs from the turbos. I was able to cut off a piece of the original section and make this piece out of billet and weld them together. And just found some bolts that I had and had to drill and tap the pan for the 8mm by 125, as well as drill out the hole that's not pre-drilled for the turbo drain back on this NA pan. Same exact hoses, fit perfectly when it's set up like this. I started out with just a completely square 2" by 2" by 1.5" block of aluminum, so it's 2" this way, 2" up and down, and then 1.5" wide out from the pan. And I was able to just cut it, and then a lot of this clearancing I did in here was just to lighten it up a little bit. Not necessary, but I just wanted to do it because otherwise it was going to be just kind of bulky sitting there. For those that don't know, I'm also going to relocate the factory oil cooler. I don't want to eliminate it altogether, but what I'm running into is it's very difficult to get a socket and a wrench on this motor mount, since I'm just using these as a solid motor mount in the chassis. Same thing with the transmission, just took the rubber section off and then mounting it directly to a crossmember. Nice thing about this is you can remove the factory oil cooler here. For those that don't know, it's just a 3/4 16 thread. Then this is just a cheap oil filter relocation kit. You don't have to go super expensive with the dang thing. Comes with just this adapter thread here. It's got these knurled threads right there, if you can tell on the camera. Kind of hard. Anyway, that's meant to bite into here and threads right into the same housing. Then we can just take our primary adapter here. You'll need a gasket on it when it actually gets assembled. And then backing it up for the gasket thickness when it gets tight. Probably end up right about there. Now I got all kinds of clearance for getting that motor mount tight. And the cheap kit comes with just some barb fitting adapters and some rubber hose. I'll be adapting and putting AN lines on there, and then I'm probably going to just relocate it down to somewhere right here if I can get this fuel line and the battery hookup remounted elsewhere, because this will be a very accessible part of the car. And then I can just run my lines right there. I'll end up mounting the factory oil cooler here again in whatever type of position that I decide is going to fit nice, and then I'm just going to run longer hoses back up to the factory locations in the block.
Now this is where my coverage of this kind of ends, because I moved on with the project and kept getting some stuff done, like clearancing for the turbos and, you know, getting all the plumbing and everything figured out. But at the time, I don't know why, I just wasn't using the camera, and then I was taking more pictures with just my cell phone and stuff, which I ended up not being able to track down to use. However, I did get this car close to ready to fire, and then it wouldn't, found out I had bad coils, and then I ended up doing like a full Haltech system on it, converting to individual coils, and eventually got the thing running. And then over the winter, I was just kind of trying to dial in and get the automatic suspension to work, because I still wanted to work with the kind of like the column shift and stuff. But I kind of had it ready to go, and I started doing a bunch of suspension stuff after I finally had everything fit in there and figured out. And I was really proud of the fact that I had it looking nearly stock under the hood. Like, it really came out nice. And about the only thing I didn't have working at that point in time was the air conditioning. But otherwise, while I was doing suspension stuff and getting ready to do that, I just, well, kind of had some bad shit happen. Yeah, lost the car and everything, the whole house, so that project came to an end. And after that, about a month and a half later, I bought this car, and started modifying it right away, which is the one that I currently still have, and I've been racing for the last 5 years now. So that's how I ended up with that one. I really wish we would have had the 2JZ one to have fun with that, but never know.